Shrink the Nation is a podcast for thoughtful, informed adults, preferably with a pour in hand. The views and opinions expressed on the show are those of the hosts and guests only and do not reflect the views of any employers, institutions, licensing boards, government agencies, bourbon distilleries, or family members, especially our family members. They've asked us to be very clear about that. This show is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said here should be taken as medical, psychiatric, legal, or professional advice. If you're in crisis, call a professional. If you're mad at something we said, we suggest journaling or emailing us with civility. We're here to challenge ideas, not diagnose strangers. We're clinicians, not your clinicians, and we have the bourbon to prove it. Let's go. All right, welcome back to Shrink the Nation. We're starting with breaking news that may be disturbing to some listeners. A group of politicians had power and chose not to use it. I know. Breathe. Check your pulse. Make sure you're not dreaming. In Indiana, lawmakers looked at a gerrymandering bill, a perfectly good, legally questionable opportunity to rig the system, and said, actually, no. No rage tweets, no merch drop, no hoodie that says democracy, limited edition. At the same time, other states are racing to rewrite voting laws like they're trying to beat a DoorDash driver to the front door, not because voting is broken, but because losing feels emotionally unsafe. And just to round things out, politics has now completed its transformation into a lifestyle brand where civic engagement means buying a hat and never reading a bill again. Psychologically, this is all the same story. Anxious systems, terrified of uncertainty, doing whatever they need to feel in control, except for the one time someone didn't. We're talking about restraint, panic, and the soothing power of a well-designed sweatshirt. So if you're drinking along with us, pour something strong, hop on the couch. This is Shrink the Nation. Let's do this, Robbie.
Let's do it.
All right. I'm David. I got my 20 plus in the military, sporting the Milius hat because why not? You know, today I'm drinking something a little bit different. I was down in the Southwest, happened across this brewery, Fuzzbot Brewing Company, went to their tap house, met the owner, really nice guy, and he recommended trying their two of these IPAs in order. First one, Scorpion Dust, which has a pretty cool little logo. And the second one is called Dinosaurs on the Dance Floor. Also,
very cool.
Pretty cool can. So I'm going to have an order, give them a shot. Really nice people I met. And they were putting this really cool mural on the wall, actually, as I was sitting there enjoying the beer. So going to give it a go.
I'm feeling a little jealous. There are lots of Ohio-based microbreweries could focus on. And instead, I'm in the midst of a snowstorm, actually, and I did not want to go drive someplace and buy bourbon. So what did I have around the house? I had some Tito's vodka. And what goes well with vodka? Well, cranberry juice. So I'm doing 5-calorie cranberry juice and Tito's vodka.
Robbie's watching his figure.
Yeah. Anyway, it's Rob, 25 years in psychiatry, 30 in the military-ish, coming to you today in a firmly civilian capacity, not representing any government entity, and, you know, exercising my First Amendment rights.
As we do. If you've seen the new Captain America movie, Brave New World, both of the ships that I served on are in that movie.
No kidding.
And mentioned by name, yeah. So I thought that was kind of cool as I was watching it. Yeah. So small world.
Well, and for those who are, I guess none of you, the tens of listeners, no one's looking at a video of this at this moment. But as it turns out, Dave and I are both sporting military headgear, helmets,
full on fighter pilot masks. Yeah. All right. Well, enough shooting the breeze. Let's get to our first pour.
This is a great one.
Yeah. Indiana Republican legislators refused to pass a proposed gerrymandering bill despite strong party incentives to do so. Their public justification centered on institutional stability, public trust, and long-term legitimacy rather than short-term partisan advantage. In a political climate where if we can, we should has become the norm, the refusal itself is now the story. I am fucking stunned. It's surprising.
It's the feel-good story of the year. 2025, feel-good story of the year, folks.
They didn't pass a gerrymandering bill. I don't know if I should be sad by that's the feel-good story, or
it's shocking in a good way, and that I guess that makes it bad. But they did a thoughtful thing. I mean, this is in psych terms, this super ego activation that they made the right call. That yes, we can do this now, but this has long-term ramifications and it will be done to us down the line. So this is a group of individuals who actually thought into the future, thought beyond themselves, and realized that there are some things that you should not do because it'll come back around. And they made a good call, and they did it with significant pressure coming from on high. Under other circumstances, I'd be kind of salty about Indiana since they did beat Ohio State, which kind of sucks.
I mean, they're a better team. What are you going to do? Like,
Well,
just play better.
they played better. They just played better. But setting that aside, because I'm an adult, I can do that. I'm very pro Indiana right now. And this has nothing to do with red or blue. This has everything to do with a group of leaders that actually engaged in a decision-making process that was future oriented, which is what we expect of our leaders.
I'm thoroughly impressed. It's not really a partisan thing. I think it's just the fact that having the opportunity to rig the system in your favor and saying, no, we don't need to. Why? Sowing distrust amongst your voting public, it doesn't really benefit anybody. And it has become such the norm to do that. Yeah, it just sows more distrust and doubt into the system. I guess, yeah, to have leaders who were willing to take the opportunity to say no, show some integrity. And yeah, I'm quite impressed by that.
Let's do a thought experiment. Let's imagine that we have a leader who has a narcissistic bend. Let's just imagine that. Let's pretend like that's the case.
I'm going to put on my pretend cap.
Yeah.
And I'm imagining it now. Wow, that would be weird.
Yeah, gosh. If our tens of listeners can imagine that we would somehow end up with a leader, a federal leader that is narcissistic. What happens with that, particularly if you're profoundly narcissistic, is that a profoundly narcissistic individual has difficulty imagining a future that doesn't feature them. For most people, most of us, and this is not saying that, I certainly have moderately profound personality pathology myself.
Say it ain't so.
Yeah. But for most people, we can forecast a future in which we don't exist, in which we're not the feature player in that future. And that does end up guiding a lot of our decisions. So we make decisions on a daily basis that are for the betterment of our children, our peers, our colleagues, the community, whatever, not because we will feature prominently into that, but because it's for the greater good. And someone who has a more narcissistic approach, particularly if it gets into the profoundly narcissistic zone.
I'm imagining.
Speaking in euphemisms.
I'm imagining it right now.
Exactly. I'm totally playing a thought experiment here.
World of pretend.
Absolutely. They struggle seeing a world that they are not the feature protagonist. And the problem with that is that you can't see a world in which you are not the feature protagonist. Your decisions are going to be very short term, very much connected to what you want in the moment versus what is best in the long term. And some of the decisions that we're seeing across the country, and we've seen in several states, Texas did it first, and then California responded. Neither one of them do I agree with, and they just offset one another. It didn't accomplish anything. It didn't affect the overall outcome. But this is refreshing in that this is a group of individuals who actually are projecting into the future, and they recognize that while at this moment they have the power to do something, it's not always going to be. And for the greater good, for the health of the political system, for quote unquote regular order, needed to make a good call to be reasonable. And they were. They actually were. They were reasonable. And I am both taken aback and incredibly proud of them. They did the right thing.
Okay, so I want to temper a little bit of it only because if we understand what happened, there are 50 seats in the Indiana legislature, if I'm correct.
I think so.
40 of them are controlled by Republicans, and the final vote was 31-19, with the Democrats all voting. You had 21 Republicans who went in that direction and say, we need to be the adults in the room, and we had 19 who did not.
Mm-hmm.
Now, are we looking at change? Are we looking at a shift in how politics is going to work moving forward? Because we obviously shifted in the direction of take every advantage possible, even if it is questionable. That's been happening for the last decade. So are we seeing a shift in a positive direction? Is this a moral injury avoidance where they're saying, we don't want this to happen to us, therefore we're going to hold fast and just stick to the rules as they exist without getting crazy into mid-cycle gerrymandering outside of the census, redistricting. Is this them figuring out a way to prevent, like Virginia, where Virginia has said they are willing to do this as well if they need to skew towards Democrats? So is it that? Are we just seeing protection from retribution from other states that may have the ability to do this as well? Or are we seeing 21 adults arrive, throwing back to the America that you and I remember, where your integrity, your sense of duty was to the country, your state, the people, rather than to the party? What are we looking at? And I don't know.
I'm going to cheat a little bit and say, I don't care. I don't care what we're looking at. What we're looking at ultimately was a reasoned decision that will stand the test of time. Whereas so many decisions that we're seeing made at this particular juncture over the last, I don't know, decade is we have power, so we're going to do it with very little thought to the future. Yeah, any of those things. Were they purely thinking in terms of liberal democracy? And when I say liberal, I mean little L, liberal. Who knows? I'm sure some of them were. Were they thinking in terms of, gee, we don't want to be a domino in the middle of the dominoes and watch this fall and each state end up doing this? And again, it ends up resulting in no net gain. It doesn't actually help anything. And it just, in the long term, puts individual states in a more difficult place. One of these days, when the politics shift and Texas has themselves or California has themselves set up the way they are, when the shift happens, it's going to compromise their political process. So I don't know which it is, but what I do appreciate is that there was a group of legislators who differentiated. They were able to maintain their identity in the face of a disagreement with the overall tribe. And even more so, they weathered the pressure that was placed on them from on high. I appreciate that. I appreciate their personal courage to do it. And in the long term, I think history will remember, whether we remember their names at all, or whether either you or I could come up with a single name at this particular juncture. But I think history will say they did the right thing. And, I personally appreciate that.
Okay, so I do take a little bit of issue with the fact that we are celebrating the fact that somebody chose not to cheat. We're really like, ooh, I'm so excited. They didn't fuck over constituents by drawing these ridiculous maps. You know, the Thanksgiving meme that says, when you're explaining gerrymandering to your family, show them this, and it's a piece of pumpkin pie with like a regular slice cut out and then just a triangle cut out in the middle of the pie. So we're celebrating now that they decided not to go in there nowhere near the census and do redistricting at a time when it just isn't done, to take advantage and try to skew everything in their favor. I mean, great. They didn't cheat. Awesome. Good job. Cool. We're super excited. They played by the rules that everyone else is playing by, except for Texas and California at this point. I guess, yeah, it's great that they're not breaking the norms for once. I feel like we're looking at in our country right now, our politics is where a tech company goes out and hires a hacker to come in and say, show us where all of your flaws are. Like, we just did that on a national level. That's what we've been doing politically now for the last decade.
Well, for the last decade, I mean, one thing that I found distressing that has become increasingly clear since 2016 to the present is that so much of what you and I and most Americans felt were institutional rules were actually just guidelines and tradition that, as it turns out, that a lot of what we previously identified as what the norms were purely just gentlemen and gentlewomen agreements. And as it turns out, if you're willing to break those, there's no law, there's no restriction that actually stops you from breaking those. And until recently, the American people, in terms of the election process, actually weeded out individuals who would diverge from these norms. And then something happened mid 2015 in which we became less restrictive. Winning became more important than those norms. We can debate that, and maybe at a future show we will debate what happened that all of a sudden winning at all cost became America, whereas previously we had some tolerance with the nature of two-party system and give and take. We were okay with give and take, and then all of a sudden we stopped being that. I personally think it started with the Tea Party, but we'd have to look into that.
I feel like every movie that we put out there, like it will come up with this, like, oh, there's this moral dilemma of should I take the easy route? Should I cheat to win? And we as Americans have always celebrated the people who had that courage not to cheat. You're going out to your kid's softball game and you're like, good job, champ. You didn't cheat today. Awesome job. Like, but we don't do that. Yet that's been the American tradition, at least on the surface, to win at all costs, as long as the cost wasn't to sell yourself out and your integrity and your morals.
Honor meant something.
It did. But now it doesn't so much. In fact, we celebrate just the win to the point where we're so excited that somebody just didn't break the rule.
Was honorable.
Just once. Yeah.
Yeah.
Were they honorable? Like we've redefined what honor is. The fact that it got to a vote and that 19 tried.
Mm-hmm.
Are we just redefining honor? At one point, it never would have made it that far. And I don't know that I can blame the Tea Party. I think this has been going on longer than that. There have been a lot of opportunities that happened before 2015 that advantages were taken when they didn't have to be taken, or in the past they never would have. And you'll see where hypocrisy has become not just the norm, but the expectation, which is odd in a world where everything is recorded. It's this information overload where you forget what somebody said yesterday, or you don't care. Maybe that's part of the algorithm of only showing you what you want to see. But we're now redefining what honor is. And I do take issue with that to some extent. Like, we're super excited that somebody chose not to cheat, but 19 people tried anyway. And we're ignoring that piece. Again, it's jumping back to our last episode. Like, the conversation we're having now, it just completely glosses over the facts of it.
In defense of the honorable action that ultimately was democratic. In other words, they voted and majority ruled. And I don't know these answers. I'm just tossing it out there, but I can go back in time to large legislation that change the way we do things. History has said this was the right call. There were always people that were on the other side. So I don't know if that's terribly different. I would say that democracy ruled the day. The sense, the idea, the concept that it is ruled by the majority, protections of the minority, the ability to tolerate dissension in different points of view. That's liberal democracy in a nutshell for me. So it worked. Yeah, 19 of them have a different perspective, but ultimately sufficient enough, and that's what's required in our democracy. Sufficient enough, greater than half, said, nah, we're not going to do this. We're going to be more thoughtful.
It's good, but I think it paints a picture of bleakness that's what we're getting excited about. We can't even say that things moved in a more positive direction. They just didn't move in a more negative direction, and we're celebrating that. They didn't get worse. Yay.
This isn't new. I mean, Eisenhower spoke toward warning about short-term power hollowing out long-term credibility. And in Madison, I mean, we can go way back to the founding fathers. Madison was concerned about the impact of factions on our political process because people they aligned more with the faction and their obligations to the faction than their obligations to the nation and to history. So this isn't a new phenomenon. The thing that sets this apart in the last decade and known remembered history is that they actually did the right thing. They did the right thing. They did the right thing for
by
once.
not doing the wrong thing.
Right.
That's my caveat to it, is just, and we can end with that. We'll end with my thought. They didn't make things worse.
Well, it was the equivalent of not texting your ex at midnight.
Congratulations, Indiana. You didn't drunk dial your ex.
I gave you all of me. Whatever. Stupid thing.
And again, in their defense, it wasn't that there wasn't political pressure, and it wasn't that they're not going to be blowback. So definitely they did it at their own detriment. And
they're all going to be primaried.
Well, and that's I guess another discussion for another day. But the punishment for doing the right thing now is being primaried. In order to have any kind of bravery within at least that side to say, let's just uphold the norms and values that we've been living with for our entire lives, is career suicide.
Yeah. This reminds me of a book not a
Drink.
quote, so you don't have to drink,
Okay,
but
okay,
a
sorry.
book. It's an interesting book with a interesting title called Rat Fucked. It's the actual title. Rat Fucked. This is the work of Karl Rove, if anyone can remember Karl Rove of Bush W fame. So Karl Rove was the engineer that encouraged gerrymandering with the idea of basically taking control by a mechanism that was not democratic. It was a mechanism of we're in control. We will now make changes that ensure we maintain control and we don't have to actually answer to the people in order to maintain control. We can just adjust it so that we stay in control regardless. And that's the problem with gerrymandering, folks. So for our tens of listeners, we talk about gerrymandering. The problem is that it ends up setting up a system in which the political party that can gerrymander is no longer accountable to the majority of the people because they set it up in such a way that they know they're going to win. But the problem with gerrymandering is that once you establish these domains, they're going to go a certain direction politically. What you end up doing is in those regions, those districts, that it no longer becomes an issue of who you're going to vote for. You know you're going to vote for a Republican or a Democrat. So it forces them actually to out Republican the Republicans or out Democrat the Democrats. And what you end up doing is pulling folks from the center farther and farther and farther to the polls. And we've certainly seen this, is that these gerrymandered districts, politicians that are more centrist, and I will go out on the limb and say more democratic, more liberal Democrat, small L liberal, it ends up putting them in jeopardy because someone who can out Republican them or out Democrat them ends up being elected. And we end up with a more and more and more polarized leadership. And it doesn't help us. It doesn't help us actually solve problems, get to anything better. Because fundamentally, the nature of democracy is that we have to work together. We just have to. That's the nature of democracy. And democracy is the worst form of government until you compare it to every other form of government. So, I encourage our tens of listeners who probably, of all the people on this planet who might be willing to read this book, I do recommend you read Rat Fucked. And that's what Karl Rove referenced it as. He said they were going to rat fuck the Democrats.
Well, we'll move on.
Yeah, we should move on from rat fuck.
Let's move on. All right. So for our second four, politicians across the spectrum are launching merch drops tied to viral moments, outrage cycles, or identity signaling, often faster than they release policy positions. Hoodies, hats, and slogans now outpace legislation as the primary interface with supporters. That just makes me sad to say. We just live in the TikTok generation now where we're just going to do dances to remind us about the one time in Indiana they failed to gerrymander their districts even further than they probably already are.
Have you seen the map? Speaking of, the map is already pretty friggin' red.
Again, no, I know they control 40 of the 50 seats. So, now it's merch, right? Like now we're connecting with people. We have social media. We have these ways to create a false sense of connectedness with politicians who, in all fairness, a lot of them could give a shit about most of their constituents as long as they're getting their votes.
Yeah, we've turned citizenship into cosplay. It's painful, actually. This is something we have talked about, not to say we're prescient, although to our tens of listeners, we are. By extension, by extension, you guys are.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone out in our audience is that special individual who recognizes these sorts of things. So thank you for that. Yeah. So we have talked about politicians becoming TikTok stars, that for so many of our politicians, becoming a politician, becoming a representative or a senator has less to do with the mandate to lead, to govern, to legislate, and has become more a platform in which they can make cool TikTok videos. And this merch thing, it's ridiculous. It truly is. It's shameless and ridiculous because who's benefiting from the purchase of merch? It's that individual, right? So they basically are looking for viral moments, not necessarily legislative wins, not necessarily doing the good of the people or the good of the United States, but viral moments that they can capitalize on and build merch around. So hoodies, hats, slogans now function as primary interface between leaders and supporters. I'll understate it here, folks. That's a problem. That's not good.
No,
No, it's not good.
no, it's not good. No, it's terrifying. It's almost, why does that word keep coming up whenever we talk politics, which is always, but it's ridiculous. It's getting to this point.
Why does ridiculous keep coming up in reference to our political?
You're not crazy. This is nuts.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it's one, there was a time where you just probably didn't know who most senators or congressmen were unless you maybe happened to vote for them or followed them. But it's a self-aggrandizement, self-promotion, and there is that level of narcissism that goes into, I guess, even wanting to be in a position. At one point, I think some of us would have agreed that people went into public service to serve people, to help, to make change. Now it's just I guess, an easier way to become famous if you just lack talent in other ways. If you can't get on a Netflix show about dating, or you're not a Kardashian, go into politics and then just make some batshit crazy statements while on the House floor, and you can sell a hoodie that gets people riled up about it. It's one thing to walk around and see people wearing, like their favorite basketball team or football team or whatever, but their favorite congressman, their favorite congressperson, just who gives a shit?
Well, it's tribal shorthand. You can wear rather than converse. So it is, and it's a symbolic substitution psychologically. So you wear your values rather than having to enact your values, or actually you wear them rather than even having to think them through. The nature of values is that you really do have to consider them. You have to ponder them. You have to put them in the context of your own life. But if you buy a hoodie or a hat that says them, then you don't have to really think them through. They mean whatever you want them to mean.
Yeah.
Without thinking them through. And then you're conveying that to others. So you don't have to actually converse. You can just pull on a trucker hat or a hoodie, and it does all the work for you.
Like if you go down the street and you see somebody wearing their Dallas Cowboys sweatshirt,
they're a douchebag.
They could probably tell you at least.
There is no such thing as a non-douchebag Cowboy fan. There just isn't.
Says the guy who's all up in Ohio State's grill. But they could probably tell you who...
It's a dynasty.
That's right. They could probably tell you who the starting quarterback is, right? Like you would say, hey, how are the Cowboys doing this year? And that person would be able to say, oh, they suck because they always suck. Yeah, Dak Prescott, he's not doing so great.
The worst fans, the worst absolute fans in all of America? Texas A&M fans. That's absolutely true.
Patrick Mahomes went to Texas A&M though, right?
I believe fully that not a single one of our tens of listeners are a Texas A&M fan. So I think I can speak out,
or at least not anymore,
without losing any market value whatsoever.
Can I finish my thought while you denigrate the state of Texas?
No, it's not
Denver,
Texas as a whole.
It's Broncos. Texas A&M. Any team. If somebody was wearing merch from a professional team and you were to say, hey, how are they doing this year? That person may have some kind of formed opinion on that. But if you were to see somebody wearing a piece of merchandise from a congressperson and you were to say, hey, what are the top 3 legislative bills? Like, what bills did they present this year? My guess is you would have no fucking clue.
None.
You'd have no idea. What did they co-sponsor? How did they vote on anything? And that, having an opinion, like, loving Dak Prescott, that's odd, but at least, you know your team. But people are buying merch and they don't know their team. They have no idea.
They're the Texas A&M fans of the political world. We're going to catch some shit over that.
No, you're going to catch some shit over that. I have no issues with Texas A&M or any other college team. Whatever.
We're a team, brother. We're a team.
Drag me down, Robbie.
Fire that comes in on me is coming in on you.
We're going to lose our 2 people who support Texas A&M. In all truth, hey.
Shit, we just went to 5s of listeners.
They had Patrick Mahomes went to Texas A&M, I believe.
He did.
I think he did. So I'm cool with that, whatever. But to put on, I seriously doubt most people would have any clue what their representative is actually doing. And I don't know if I worry about that more than the person who is just excited for whatever they do. Because I think just that by the nature of politics as it is, the representative is supposed to represent their district. And yet that's definitely not happening across the board. They're just going with their party at this point on both sides. It's a huge problem. And one I think would be rectified by just expanding how many members of the House that we have so that there's more equal distribution and smaller population that they have to represent so that they can actually bring their ideas and make the changes. Ultimately, what would that probably do? I think you just see less change. I think you would see smaller changes or more thoughtful changes that require more compromise. But maybe I'm talking crazy. I mean, maybe just my viewpoint of what America is predicated off of a past that doesn't exist anymore.
Or an imagined past. And that's something to consider, that, our sense of what is real is contingent upon our memory of that realness. Now, I concur with you, as it turns out. So if both of us feel like that's real, it's possibly real. Possibly. But, it is concerning that, it's not, I didn't pass a bill, but I did pass this Shopify checkout list. So that's concerning. That
It is.
boy. Well, and follow the money. So where's this money go? So if you're selling merch, where's the money go? Does that go into the politician's pocket? Does it go into their war chest for their reelection?
But what does it matter? I mean, is there really that much money in merch? I mean, are they making millions off of merch? Probably not. I would imagine it has more to do with just the popularity. I mean, it at this point, we're voting either based off of the letter next to the name or just name recognition. And so it's self-promotion. It's just a way to get your name out there. I mean, how often do you see somebody who just says something just to say something?
They're getting the same recommendations we are in terms of how to make ourselves more marketable.
Yeah.
You got to have this and you got to have that. And you got to do merch and you got to
just
do
promote.
whatever.
Yeah. Just get your name out there. It doesn't matter what you're saying. It definitely is sad that our politicians are now doing the things that a cover band would do, working at a dive bar. Cool.
I mean, they're doing what wannabe internet influencers do is really.
Except they have a bigger platform. They have the ability, they have some kind of name recognition. They've won something at some point. Now, questionably, are you winning because of your ideas, or are you winning because you just happen to represent the party that was going to win in your district because it was so fucking gerrymandered? As you said, out Republican the Republican, or at this point, you have appeased the correct people for them to say, yep, vote for that person. Ironically, usually they don't even know who that person is. Again, it doesn't matter. It's a vote, right? I think we've said it before. It's irrelevant, unfortunately, at this point, who is sitting in that seat, as long as they're going to vote in your favor. If they're going to vote with you, cool, put them in. And if you're not sure, get somebody who you are sure, who is past that litmus test of fealty towards the party. You and I, though, or I should say, I still think about the country as being...
You don't think I do? What the fuck, man?
Yeah, I assume you do, but I still think the country is probably more important than partisan politics, and the decisions that are being made should benefit the most people, not just the people who were able to rig it.
Well, now that I've been besmirched by your sense of me,
I just don't want to speak for you. I don't want to drag you down,
because I was clearly going
Texas
to wait
A&M
a minute. I don't agree with that.
No, fuck you. I don't agree with that. Yeah, I just don't want to. I don't want to drag you. If I feel the country would be best in a certain direction,
I am a believer in liberal democracy. I cannot speak toward Rob. Rob may not be.
I think we should do things that are right for everybody, but I ain't about Rob.
Right. Fuck people. Is what you. Rob could care less about people, really. It honestly, right at this moment in history, like, just do something that's funny that I can banter about on a podcast, please. Thank you.
That seems to be the only qualification one needs at this point. I think you have two qualifications. Are you going to vote the way your party wants you to vote, no matter what, no matter how ridiculous that vote is? And can you set yourself apart in some silly way and sell some merch?
Yep. Moral flexibility and a little bit of charisma. That's all you need.
There you go. All right. Well,
speaking of moral flexibility, we are perfect.
That's right. No issues with us. We do nothing wrong. Okay.
Hey, it's Rob from Shrink the Nation. As my friend David so eloquently states at the beginning of the show, we are clinicians, but we're not your clinician. We love to joke around and dive into the tough topics, but there's something really important we need to say. If you're struggling with your mental health or facing substance use issues, we want you to know you're not alone. We have dedicated our professional careers to mental health, and we care deeply about it. It's okay to ask for help. Reaching out to a professional in your area could be the first step toward feeling better. Don't wait. There's support out there, and it works. Please take that first step. We want you to be well. Now let's get back to the show. Oh, and don't tell David I said he was eloquent. He'll be insufferable.
All right. Well, let's go to our final four. Voting laws and control anxiety. Who are we afraid of? Across multiple states, lawmakers are accelerating changes to voting laws, some expanding access, others tightening it, well ahead of the 2026 election cycle. The speed and intensity suggest less concern with logistics and more with existential fear about legitimacy, loss, and control. So what the hell's going on, Robbie?
Well, we can go state to state and we can see what they're passing. And I'm speaking in incredible generalities here, but those who are in blue states are tending to expand voting, and those who are in red states are tending toward contracting and or restricting voting. And it does strike me as, and this is going to make me sound like I am political, or that I have a political leaning. I don't. I'm so ridiculously centrist. It just at this moment, being centrist, you glow blue because you're centrist. But I personally think expanding voting is the way to go. That in general, the health of our democracy comes down to the ability of parties to represent the majority, and expanding the voting actually requires that they end up representing the norm, the majority, rather than contracting. Although we have seen contraction on both sides. I mean, from the blue side, they got so focused on woke type things that it ends up losing the majority. And again, the nature of liberal, small L democracy is that we are, majority rule, protection of minorities. We do have to protect minorities, that they have certain rights as afforded to them by the Constitution. But in this case, it's zero-sum thinking. Your participation feels like an erasure to a certain percentage. So we run the risk that we might lose. That means that our thought process, our belief structure is wrong. So rather than facing this moral dilemma, this existential angst that we are wrong on this, it's much easier to just shake the play field in such a way that we have to be right. So, it's using loaded dice, basically. So you never have to face the potential that you're just wrong.
We see the arguments on both sides. It's fascinating. On one side, restricting access is framed as making sure that only people who can legitimately vote are able to vote.
That's how it's usually framed, yeah.
That's the frame of it. On the other side, expanding access is framed as getting as many people who are eligible to vote is key. But each side will reframe the framing to be something different, at least to their party. So on the right, the description of what the left is trying to do is trying to expand voting so that people who are ineligible to vote are able to vote, to allow fraud.
Mm-hmm.
On the left, the reframing is that you're not restricting voting to just people who are eligible to vote. You're restricting it to just your voters to have access to vote. I can't sit here and say I know what either side is actually thinking, because I don't.
Sure you can.
Well, I don't. No, I don't. I can't tell you what is being said behind closed doors.
I can tell you.
I think the thought process has been for a long time that the more people who vote in an election, the more likely the Democrat is going to win.
Mm-hmm.
You have a higher likelihood that the Democratic candidate's going to win. If you restrict voting, more likely the Republican candidate will win. What is that based off of?
Well, there's a long-running bias that good law-abiding individuals who have jobs and homes are Republicans, and those who are not either law-abiding or do not have homes or stable lives are Democrat. Now, is there any truth to that? I'm honestly not sure. I've not run the numbers on that. But the idea is that if you do things like voter IDs, require proof of citizenship, that's going to somehow favor Republicans versus increasing access to voting to underserved populations, poverty-stricken populations that maybe struggle to meet some of these requirements, that's going to support Democrats. I honestly don't know. Again, I've just not done the research, I suppose, to the extent. What I will say is that from a psychological lens, projection, fraud becomes a container for fear of loss. So, we can't lose. My belief structure is so accurate, is so real, is so valuable that I can't lose. I have to be right, because if it proves that a majority of Americans say something different, then I have to reevaluate my perspective. I have to reevaluate my stance. I don't want to do that. So what I want is that if I win, yes, awesome, I am right. If I lose, I am saying it in a very personalized way, because that's how people kind of approach this. It's like when Ohio State gets beat by Indiana, and I say, we lost. No, I wasn't playing. I'm not on the team.
You've watched 2 games this year.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't lose shit. However, it is this personalization, because loss ends up becoming personal, and loss means, in the political realm, means that we have to reevaluate our perspective or our stance. So it's fraud on both sides. I mean, fraud becomes the thing that happens when we, whatever side you're on, we lose. We didn't lose. It was fraud. That's the focus on these voter laws, is this idea of fraud. Or on the opposite side, hey, fraud's not an issue because we're not in the majority, so we don't have to worry about fraud. From the Democrat side, they're like, oh, we don't have to worry about fraud because we're not in the majority. We're not really faced. If we lose, it's something else. It is not, I guess, surprising. And fundamentally, I think we've shown that there are some voting regulations that could be plussed up. But, ultimately, democracy doesn't collapse when people stop voting. It collapses when people stop trusting others to vote. The obsession with protecting democracy often masks something simple: terror of losing cultural dominance. If your system panics at turnout, it's not just fragile, it's insecure. And that's a psychological phenomenon. If you're so insecure in your stance, then you experience terror at losing political dominance.
Does it seem odd, and maybe just a feature of being in a 2-party system, to create such a black and white perspective of our thought process, that one, and maybe this is just caused by the fact that we live in this AI, TikTok, online world now, where being in that 2-party system, you're somehow rooting for your team in spite of the fact that you may not agree with the vast or even all of what your team says. You just disagree more with the other team. And so we're in a system where it's so binary that you're kind of forced into being on one side or the other. I just find that interesting. What does Young say?
Well, all right, to our tens of listeners. So I made comment last time about wanting a young action figure because I had no idea that they actually existed. And what David did was search the internet and actually found me a Carl Jung action figure. And I'm holding it right now. Not that you can see, because
So
this is
I have to clarify, my wife found that.
okay.
I got to give her 100%
Well,
credit. She found it.
My thanks to your wife.
I did
but
impulsively buy it and send
'cause
it to you, but
it
she
is
found it.
it has become one of my favorite things. It sits here on my desk, reminding me of Carl Jung. What would Jung say about this? He would say, "You guys are fucking nuts," is what he was. No, he probably wouldn't. He was a little more erudite than that, but his focus was very much on shadow work. And each party pushes a lot of stuff into their shadow, and losing makes them face that shadow. Losing makes them question themselves and the validity of their thought process. Where we stand is that this does very much feel like almost like a sports endeavor to me. I mean, this is the equivalent of me rooting for Ohio State, not because I play for Ohio State or I'm employed by Ohio State, but because somehow I've identified I'm born and raised in Ohio. It becomes part of my identity and becomes part of what I feel proud of. Now, as a proud Buckeye, I can say there's a lot to be proud of with Ohio State football. Long tradition of excellence. Woody Hayes, probably the best coach of all time. To this day, you can call Woody Hayes' phone number.
We'll check. Excuse me.
You can call Woody Hayes' phone number and hear one of his best speeches. I think there is something to be proud there, but I played no role in it, folks. I played no role in it. And when we win, that's great. And when we lose, it doesn't really affect me. It doesn't change a damn thing. But with our political identity, because it's cultural dominance, it is scary on a different level. Like, what if my sense of culture, what I feel is real and good and valuable, isn't? It's much easier to adjust the laws in such a way to ensure victory. By victory, I mean continued cultural dominance, than it is to just question whether the culture that we think is dominant, or more to the point, is that I don't think anyone's culture is in danger here, folks. It's the nature of a liberal democracy. We all get to continue to have our own individual cultures, regardless of who's in political power. So Young, and here's the other point, I question whether he'd have a kung fu grip. He does. He has a kung fu grip. And I also question whether he would be fully articulatable. And it turns out he is, except for the fact he can't sit because his suit jacket prevents movement of his thighs. But beyond that, he can do some pretty impressive articulation. And it's a real shame that this is an auditory medium versus a visual one. For some reason, they put his glasses on his forehead. One of the curses of middle age is eyesight. So I didn't have my glasses on. And I thought they had put horns on him, which I immediately perceived as a slight against Carl Jung. But it turns out they're just his eyeglasses. It's just his eyeglasses up on his forehead, because apparently there's some photo out there of Carl Jung with his glasses on his forehead.
Well, this took a weird left turn.
It did.
I feel like we've addressed
Killed
the
it.
topic as much as we possibly can. So let's get to prescriptions. So I have one. Any legislator tempted to rig a district must first redraw their own family seating chart at Thanksgiving, so everyone feels fairly represented. If grandma still flips the table, the bill fails automatically.
Okay. I'm going to say political actors must tolerate losing tactical advantage without experiencing ego death. Not every opportunity is a mandate, and sometimes integrity is just saying, nah, I'm good.
Before launching any political merch, candidates must wait 72 hours and ask themselves the following: is this a policy? Is this just a hoodie? Am I trying to replace governance with cotton? And if it glows in the dark, add another 72 hours.
No doubt. All right, my last one is citizens must stop confusing aesthetic alignment with civic participation. You can't vote with a hoodie, and not everyone governed effectively from a merch booth.
Sad but true. All right. Well, I think that did it for this episode. Did we solve anything? I don't know that we did. We were just dumbfounded by the ridiculousness that is our political environment. So thank you to everybody who stuck around. Go ahead and share, like, do whatever you can. Smash that subscribe. We'll be back next week, and soon we'll have our year-end episode, which I'm looking forward to. So let's cue up that music, and we're out.